Hi, Laurie. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. It is so exciting and such an honor to be here with you today, Vicki.
Thank you. Thank you. Our topic today is, can I really love myself? And I'm really excited about this topic with you because I know that you have a coaching business and you've done a lot of self work yourself on this topic. And
Yes.
so, to make sure that we get it right, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. So, my name is Laurie Schible. My business is Laurie Schible Coaching. And I spent 20 years in the corporate world. So, I lived the constant roller coaster of burnout, in and out, high stress for a very long time. And I never felt like I belonged. And the one thing that was consistent throughout my career is I really loved and honored the role of leadership and of mentor. And through a series of events, brought me into this space of coaching, which feels like such a gift to have found this. And I feel like it is truly a calling for me. I am so passionate about helping people have their breakthroughs and live better lives. So, where I really focus on is I really help business owners and professionals manage their minds and their emotions so they can create the life and the work that they truly desire. And what I have learned is that we are the only things really ever getting in the way. And it is about the mind chatter that happens automatically that creates a whole rapid fire series of feelings and emotions that stop us or hold us back more than anything. So I help people open up to these blind spots and understand how to truly have radical acceptance, love of themselves, and empower themselves so they can really create the love of life and work that they desire. So, that in a nutshell is what I do.
I love that. It feels exciting, and I can see your passion for what you do in your face, in your voice. So let's start with the concept of loving yourself, what that
Yeah.
means in everyday life. How would you define it?
Yes, that is such a great question, Vicki. And I think it is something that we're really not taught in our society because self love, the phrase in and of itself, can go two ways. It can go the way of what we talk about, or it can go the way of egocentric, self centered. And we're so conditioned that that is where we lead, that sometimes people really like shy away from this like radical self acceptance and self love because we automatically go to like, oh, that's so like egotistical or
Mm.
conceited. And that's not what it actually means. That is an entirely different thing. And to be honest, people who are very conceited or self-centered are generally actually very insecure and are very much looking for something and don't really contain self-love. So for me, self-love really means having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness. It's about taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing your well-being to please others.
I love that. That's my definition too. How
Awesome.
did you know that?
We're so in line.
Yeah. Given that, what qualities would I embody to love myself? Could it be just compassion and caring, but also tough love? Could that work in there?
Yeah, both actually, right? I think so. Here's the thing. Compassion is a huge part of this, and the tough love piece comes from something we'll talk about in a little bit around how to do that in a neutral way, so that we're not highly judgmental. because really the secret, the qualities are about radical self-acceptance and self-approval. So when we approve ourselves exactly as we are, then everything in life works. And this means that we have radical acceptance of our now, and we celebrate exactly who we are in this very moment. So even as we grow and evolve, and we go through the hard times and we falter, and as we have breakthroughs to get to our next level, we're constantly celebrating who we are in this very moment and in the next very moment, the good, the bad, the ugly, all along the way. And when we can have that level of radical self-acceptance and take ownership of everything that happens, be willing to get it wrong and to learn, celebrate when we have success, and when that happens, celebrate all of the parts of us. That's when things get really fun. And that's when we really create the joy and the happiness. Self-love with compassion, grace, and honor is what helps us create that happiness and joy in life. And that actually comes first. We talk a lot about, people are like, okay, one day when I get to this place in my career, my business gets to this level and I'm in a good relationship and I have this and I have that, then I'll be happy. And that's actually backwards thinking. And the secret around self-love is owning all of it and finding joy in who we are in every moment. And when we feel joyful now, that is actually the fuel that drives our motivation to go do all the things that we desire to do. And that's where we create new opportunities and we make more money and we actually open up our minds and we become even more creative. So it's our way of being that actually comes first, and self-acceptance comes first. So then all these little miracles happen all over the place. And when we do it that way, it seems to happen without effort. And that really comes from being intentional about our way of being before we go to do all the things that we desire to do.
I appreciate that a lot. That comment that it can be effortless almost, and a sense
Yes.
of ease instead of the driving and striving and working and trying and pushing ourselves that I was
Mhm.
conditioned to do in the corporate world.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because it doesn't come without hard work and effort. But when we push and we are constantly in that, what we're actually creating is resistance. We're trying to force it. And when we actually come from an intentional place of this actually gets to be easy, it doesn't mean that we're not working hard or doing a
Yeah.
lot or efforting. It's about how we're stepping into it. And we can be just as busy throughout the day. And if our intentionality is this gets to be fun and easy, we can be super productive and have it feel good and actually have it just flow very naturally instead of it feeling very stressful and overwhelming and exhausting. So that's a really, really radical difference in how we approach our work.
I agree 100%. What might
Yeah.
a daily practice include to be self-loving?
Well, it's an interesting question, Vicki, and I always say to my clients, the first anything that we do, it starts with ourselves. And we talk about this radical self-acceptance and self-approval. And when we have that, we love ourselves. We create that. And it's critical for us to love ourselves, accept ourselves first. And we are conditioned to look external for all of our answers, for approval, for what's right or wrong, right? It's just we are conditioned as a society to look outside ourselves for all of that. But truly, the only answer comes from within. We're the only ones that know truly what is right for us in any given moment. And that's why it is so important to start from within and to trust ourselves. So there's a few steps in that. And first is really trusting yourself, trusting your intuition, knowing that you always have the answers and really listening in. And another big factor is about forgiveness. And when we think about, when I say forgiveness, forgiveness really comes from, it might be forgiving others. It's also about forgiving ourselves. So when we are struggling, like a good example is all of the dis-ease that happens in our system, right, that can cause diseases and a lot of other things, it usually comes from some state of unforgiveness that we're living with in our bodies. So when we're holding on to grudges, resentment, or disappointment, when we actually give that up and we let it go is when we find peace within. And that's when we come back into alignment with ourselves and we have the acceptance of ourselves. Does that make sense?
Concept. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And so forgiving is, and it's important to note too, forgiving is not about condoning the bad behavior of others. It's just about being willing to actually let it go. Because when we hold on, the only person that we are actually hurting is ourselves. So all we have to do is really just be willing to forgive. And when we let go, we release ourselves from the burden. And then we love ourselves enough to get out from under that burden. So that's really important. Another component of it is forgiving ourselves. And I have an interesting exercise that I use. I have a daily practice that I'll share what I do. It helps me really be intentional about what way of being am I choosing to come from as I go about my day. And I tie in, what do I get to believe in order to make all of this possible? So my personal morning practice, I actually go through, this doesn't take very long. I will go through just some quick journaling and I just go through an assessment of, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Because our thoughts and our feelings for most of us tend to run us. And that's why it is so important to become aware of what we're actually thinking, because our thoughts are so automated, they become habitual. And even our feelings, right? The feeling of self-doubt, the feeling of overwhelm. Overwhelm is actually just a feeling. And overwhelm tends to come in when we're avoiding doing something. Because at the root, we doubt ourselves, or we might feel imposter syndrome where we're comparing ourselves to someone else, like, oh, I could never be like that. And then we doubt ourselves. And at the root for almost everyone is that we don't feel like we're enough. So understanding that is, when we journal, it helps us uncover for ourselves what's actually going on underneath the situation of what's happening. So taking a few minutes to just journal and think about, okay, what are the thoughts? What am I feeling? What's actually creating it? What's actually true? That helps us outline what are just our own thoughts and feelings versus what's actually true. What are the facts? Like, what could we prove in a court of law, right? Versus thoughts and feelings, which most of the time aren't even true, right? They're just things that go flooding through our system. most
Yeah.
of which aren't true, right? So then we get to decipher. So doing a brief journaling exercise helps me kind of decipher that. It's really self-coaching. So I do that. And then I have a list of beliefs that I say to myself each day. And they're reminders for me of who I'm stepping into. And it's important to state the belief in present time. So, like, part of my beliefs, I have my list here. I am at peace. I am constantly generating money flow easily. So, beliefs you want to state in present tense as if they are already happening, because the words that we say, our brains are hearing. So think about all the things that we say to ourselves, right? The inner critic, right? All the harsh things that we say. Our brain is always listening, and our brain doesn't decipher between good and bad. It just hears what it hears. And then our brain goes to work on making what it hears come true, because our brain is just hardwired to keep us safe. So our brain's going to do whatever it takes to keep us safe. So if we are stating, okay, this is something as if it is already true, the brain goes, oh, okay, this is how it is. And then our brain will start reinforcing that. So it's a really interesting dynamic around belief work that we're not really taught, because that really embodies our way of being, which is really more of like a feminine quality, not male, female, just in terms of
Right.
like feminine energy versus masculine energy, right? So feminine energy is all about flow, intentionality. Masculine energy is about linear thinking, thought process, critical thinking. Both are valuable and beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and we all have access to all of them. And as a culture, we've all, men, women, children, everyone, have been taught to really lean into our masculine energy. So it feels different to lean into this intentionality and way of being. And when we practice it on a daily basis, it's profound how different it can actually take you through the course of your day. So I do quick journaling, and then I go through my belief statements and I say them as if they're already true. And then sometimes I'll do like a brief meditation. And meditation is literally nothing more than just really sitting still, deep breathing, and emptying out your mind. So you're really uncluttering your mental and emotional space. That's really all of that is. And when you clear out all the clutter, because most of what's happening in our brain, it's a lot of our critical thoughts and then tons of stuff from the external world that, we've consumed. So meditation helps us unclutter our minds and our emotions and start from a clean slate. So that's my morning practice. And especially on the days where I am feeling doubt, where my inner critic is starting to take over, right? I notice that in my journaling. I jot it down, and then I write, what do I choose to believe instead? And then I go through that process. So that to me has been a really profound way for me to start my day. That has been what has helped me like catapult my business forward.
I appreciate your comments because I think as a society, we're also trained that once you learn something, it's the same as implementation. And that's just not the truth. We have
Yeah.
to do something to make it real.
Mm-hmm.
And I can slip back into that negative critical thinking without that self awareness that journaling and meditating provides, and clearing
Mm-hmm.
that space to let that critical voice come back up and say, oh, there you are again, you pesky little fella. Let's just slap you down a little bit and put in something a little more self loving and self caring in our thinking. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so important. I'm so glad you brought that up, right? Because that being kind to ourselves and not criticizing ourselves is what leads to self-love. And we
Yeah.
all know, right? We all have that inner voice that so harshly judges, the inner critic, like the things that we say to ourselves in our head, we would never say to
Mm-mm.
anyone else. And it's that voice that is us thinking and criticizing ourselves. When we're criticizing ourselves, it's hard to love ourselves. So that's the catching ourselves in the act of that, and then going, oh, okay, well, what's actually true here? And then feeding ourselves with what we know is true and what we believe and desire to be true. That is a huge shift. So that is very, very helpful. And this morning practice really helps kind of put aside that inner critic and those judgmental thoughts and replace them with what we desire to
Yeah.
think and to feel.
If our
Yeah.
best friend was talking to us, what would they say, right?
Yes.
How did you come to this work, and what do you gain personally from doing this?
That is such a good question, Vicki. I seriously I know I will be on a growth journey for the rest of my life because I love it. It is this constant self-discovery that is constantly taking me deeper. And the more that I do and the deeper I go, the more I'm able to do for my clients. And the more I do, the more I learn. And the more I learn, the more I realize how much I have to learn. And it is so humbling and empowering at the same time. And I was just going through a practice the other day where I was thinking about, like, I was going through a whole like confidence issue, like like
I do.
having a doubt day, right? So I just looked at like where I was even 6 months ago. I am in totally a different place than I was even 6 months ago because I'm just constantly on this journey. And I have made it my life's work. And like, where did this start? It's funny to hear that question because I attributed it to when I was in the corporate world. Always, like, what I loved more than anything was managing a team, because I love to mentor and guide them. And I would always tell my employees, like, my goal is for you to one day become my boss. And what I realized when I realized this was like my life's work in making the transition, I was telling a lifelong friend this, like, okay, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to become a life coach, and I'm getting certified. And he just looked at me and he said, Laurie, you have been coaching your whole life. He's like, I remember you in middle school. Like, you were the person who could, like, literally would had a sense and a pulse on everyone in the room and would sense that one shy person in the corner, and you would go up and you would talk to that one person. He's like, in high school, you were the person who didn't belong to any clique or club, and you were a part of every clique and club. So it was really interesting to hear that just from an external observation, right? That it has been such a natural thing that I've actually been doing my whole life, which makes sense now looking back why I was so drawn to that and did it so naturally in my corporate world, and how it ultimately led me down to this path.
Yeah. Thank you. It's very fulfilling, I can tell, for you. So,
Yeah.
as many of my clients, and I'm sure you run into it too, are very challenged with putting themselves first. Can you share a little bit the price tag they pay for people pleasing and for accommodating?
Absolutely. And I will just tell you this, the price is immense. It is the difference between actually living the life you're meant to live and living unhappy, having misery in your life. It is the difference between actually going after your dreams and making them a reality, because it's all possible. It's all possible for us. And living with regrets. So the cost to me, when I think about it, is actually immeasurable. And we all have gifts. We are all born worthy, and nothing has changed. We're just conditioned to think
Yeah.
otherwise. And we all, like, there's a reason that none of us looks the same, right? We all have different body shapes and types and styles and personalities. We all have unique gifts. And they look like every different shape and form that you can imagine. And when we really tap in and assess what are the core values and what do I really want? What do I really desire? And asking yourself that question without the external influence, without the, oh, well, this is what I want, but I could never do that because, well, this is what I would love to do. Oh, but I don't have the talent for that, right? How quickly we squash our own dreams.
Mm-hmm.
The cost is that we might live completely out of alignment and not truly find our joy in life. The cost is exhaustion, overwhelm, disease. It's profound, right? When any of us, and especially as women, because of conditioning, we're conditioned when we're little that boys are rewarded for what they do. You know, oh, look at Billy running out in the field and catching the ball, and oh, he fell down, and oh, isn't that great? And as girls, we're conditioned for who we are. You know, oh, little Susie, she's so polite and quiet. Oh, look at her pretty little dress, right? So from a very early age, we get conditioned and we follow in that path, and it gets so deeply rooted in us that it can mask what we truly desire, and it can also make us feel like, oh, we could never have that. When those glimpses of our true desires come to the surface, our conditioning, we immediately go to, oh, but I could never have that. I could never do that, just because of this deep conditioning. And when we become aware of that, and we actually allow ourselves to dream, and we allow ourselves to desire, and really actually just own what we want without knowing how, just owning what we want, we're already coming into alignment with ourselves. We're staying true to who we are. And this can work like even in the corporate world, right? Where the tendency is we overwork, we take on things and more things because we think, oh, that's the right thing to do. Or if I could only do this or work harder, then I'll get the promotion, or I'll, right? The list goes on and on. So really it stems from people pleasing and overgiving and thinking that, oh, if I just do more, take on more. And what ends up happening is we throw ourselves into exhaustion, overwhelm, burnout, and we lose our joy in life. We lose our sense of aliveness. It takes an extreme toll on our mental and emotional well-being, our physical well-being. And if we keep going down that path, it can lead to all sorts of disease, illness, right? So it's the key for us is to become aware and to take ownership and agency over our lives, to know that it doesn't have to be that way. And when we think about what is the cost, when we keep going to that level, what is the cost to not only your life, but your marriage, the relationship with your kids, relationships with your friends, your family, your level your quality of life. There are so many prices that we pay for walking someone else's path, for not speaking up, for not taking on the extra project, for saying yes when we want to be a no. There are so many levels to this. And at the core, right, this is where we get to see it for what it is. And this really stems into what we define as what's called patriarchy, right? Patriarchy has been around for a very, very long time. Patriarchy affects men and women. And if we look at how we're living today, everything really shifted in the last like 50 years or so, 100 years or so with Industrial Revolution, and then the last 50 years with women having more or less equal rights, right, to really go after any job that we desire. So now we're all in the workforce, and as women, we're now full-time employees, we're full-time moms, we're cooks, we're cleaners, we're taking care of the 1,001 tasks, and we haven't been given the tools on how to say no, on how to really stand up for what we believe is actually right. You know, we think about how many times have we actually really felt it in our bones, like in our intuition, that something's off, something's not right, and we didn't speak up. And then we later found out the consequences of that, and we wished that we had said something. So many layers to this around the costs that we pay. And this is true for men too. So women come from a level of oppression, right? Where it used to be that we were actually worth less than men. You know, we didn't have the right to own property or earn money. And on the flip side, men had the expectation that they must provide. They must fight. They must fight for the best life possible. They have to be providers. They can't show or express emotion because that would make them appear weak, right? So interesting when we really look at this history and where we are today, where that's not really true anymore, right? We all have opportunity to really create the life that we desire. And especially in our country, it is not true in every country, but in our country, in our culture, you know, we have an abundance. We have opportunities and abundance and capabilities. And what we get to really own for women is that it's okay to say no. We don't have to people please, because remember, when we have radical self-acceptance and we put ourselves first, that's when we create joy in our lives, and that benefits everybody around us. When we people please and we overgive, we're exhausted.
Right.
And then no one around us benefits, including ourselves. We all lose, right? And then on the flip side, really, we get to give permission for our men to feel, to own their emotions, to be compassionate, to be open and vulnerable, to not always put on their warrior hats and be the strong one. We're all human, and we get to have real human experiences. And the key for all of that is the acknowledgement of our feelings, our thoughts and emotions, and the allowance for them. And a lot of times what we do is we just resist it, right? Anytime anything uncomfortable or painful pops up, we just want to shove it down. And those emotions live in our system. They don't go away. And the more we shove down, the more we're resisting them, the stronger they get, the bigger they get, and the more issues they cause in our system. It's
so
universal.
Yes, you're really talking about both men and women living authentic lives.
Yes.
Whatever that means for them. Knowing what it is, first of all, which is the first step, really. And then I think creating a community around you that allows you to express that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So true. And my current mentor is Dr. Valerie Rain, and she wrote the book Patriarchal Stress Disorder. And she is a well-trained psychotherapist. And what she discovered over time, she's like, okay, talk therapy isn't quite cutting it. There's got to be something else. And she started doing somatic body processing. And she started doing it with all of her clients. So she had clients who went through like major traumas in their life. And then she had clients who had like great lives, right? Great upbringing, no like major trauma happening in their life, but they were in like high stress jobs, putting a lot of pressure on themselves. They were people pleasing, over giving. And what she noticed is this somatic body processing, which is really just showing you how to process through your emotions and like complete your stress cycle and allow it all to come through you, that everybody was benefiting from it. So it's really interesting digging into this like somatic body level and understanding how our emotions live within us and how profoundly they affect us. And when we just simply allow them through and process them, how much peace we can gain. And remember, when we bring that peace to ourselves, when we actually, instead of stuffing, we just acknowledge and we allow and we let it to process through, we can bring peace, we can bring acceptance. And that radical acceptance allows us to love. So it's really a beautiful process that we're at large learning so much more around how the brain works and how pliable it is, right? Neuroplasticity, like, a habit, just because we have it, it's changeable. It's just a path that's well worn in our brain, and we can create new paths. With consistency, we create new well-worn paths that with a habit that better serves us. And now we're really learning about this emotional process and how the body never forgets. All the emotions reside in us, and when we don't allow them through, they sit in us and they fester and they grow. So it's really important for us to process that through. So yeah, so much to this and what all of these things, the mental, the emotional, the physical, that can bring us back into this radical self-acceptance and self-love.
Mind, body, spirit. And if we minimize or disregard one part, the other parts either become more exaggerated to try to make up for what I'm ignoring in my body, or so to find that alignment and harmony. My show is based on small changes leading to big shifts.
Yeah.
And this is a big topic. And you and I have been in this work for a long, long time. So somebody that's just kind of getting started or thinking, wow, this is what I need. What are some concrete things they might do?
Small shifts, right? I always say like small hinges swing big doors.
I love that.
Very small changes, right? Over time create massive shifts, massive results. So just a couple things. I want to touch on the emotional piece. So the nice thing is you don't have to actually know what are all the emotions that are surfacing with me. And when emotions arise, the first step is allow them. Acknowledge that they're present and allow them to be. Because when we consciously acknowledge them, we immediately lessen the hold that they have on us. Because remember, in all of this, our thoughts and emotions typically run us. So this shifts so that we are in charge of our thoughts and emotion, all the difference in the world. And you do that by simply acknowledging whatever comes up. And this is another piece of conditioning, right? We want like the instant gratification, right? I want the quick fix, give me the pill, I want it now. And when we feel pain, we just want to make it better. right? And even like if you're like getting consoled by someone, usually what we hear people say is like, oh, it'll be okay, it's going to be better, like, oh, just do this, it'll be great. And actually what serves us so much better is to just say, it's okay, just be with it. When we create allowance for everything we feel without judgment, feelings are fleeting. We usually have a ton of feelings, and we could feel like deep grief and utter joy literally at the same time. And emotions are fleeting. They come and they go. They usually have a 90-second span, which is really interesting, right? And then some feelings stay with us, mainly because it's a habit. We like to feel a certain way. Even if logically it doesn't make sense to us, we're like, okay, I don't want to feel overwhelmed, but it's such a habit to feel overwhelmed, we stay in overwhelm. So just know that emotions are fleeting. And when we allow them, then we can process through them and get them out of our system much quicker, and they no longer have a hold on us. So the first step is to acknowledge, what am I feeling, and create space for it, allow it. And then just a quick tip to process it through. One of the easiest ways to actually process emotions through, which is also like completing our stress cycle, is to move your body. So whatever that looks like for you, like go for a run, go for a walk, do a quick boxing series, like dance like a crazy person in your house for 5 minutes. Any kind of movement allows those emotions to come through you, and you can release them. And you need to acknowledge them and just know, like, okay, this is here, and just say whatever needs to come out, allow it to come out. So versus when we resist, we're just shoving it in, it's not going away. It will continue to get louder and louder. So create space, acknowledge, allow, and process, move those emotions through you through movement. So that's my first like beginner level. Like if you did that on a daily basis, you don't even have to know what the emotions, all of them are. Just say whatever needs to come through, allow it to come through, and just move your body and allow that to come through. That will help reduce your stress, your overwhelm, and the emotions that are residing. You will feel relief. So another thing that is a really great practice, and this is actually a way to help keep things in a neutral space. So when we do something, whether we have great success or if it's an utter failure, here's the way I look at this. Whenever we have success, there are always things that we did do wrong, even though it was successful. And conversely, when we failed at something, it didn't work out, there are many things that we did do right, and then some things that we didn't do right that had it not work. So when we think about success and failure that way, it's a lot easier to look at it all from a neutral space. And this is, I do a very simple 3-step process to evaluate anything. I do this in my business, and like always, like if I have a consult or if I have a coaching session, I'm like, okay, that didn't go well. Let me evaluate this. Or it went great. Okay, let's evaluate it. What did work? Or anything, conversation with my husband, right? Anything in your life you can evaluate and learn from, whether it is a success or a failure or ongoing. So what I do is I first ask myself, okay, what worked or what's working? And I write down all the things that worked. And it's important to ask yourself what worked first. And the next question I ask is, okay, what didn't work or what's not working? And it's important to ask that what worked first, because when our brain goes to that, we start thinking about all the things that really did work out, and that'll lead to other things. Oh, well, then this happened, and this happened. Oh, and this happened. When we focus on what didn't work first, it tends to set us in that negative mood, and it's harder to look at the positive or the things that worked. So do it in this order. Step 1, what worked? Step 2, what didn't work? And then step 3, just ask yourself, what can I learn here? What am I learning from this situation? What are all the things that I learned? And here's the gold in this. All those things that you learned, those are the things that you can go take action on. So you'll always know what you need to do. So that's a really easy way, whether you do this to evaluate your business, a project that you're doing, that you're working on or finished, conversation that you have, anything. You can use that process for anything in your life, and it is profoundly revealing. And when we can look at it from a neutral space, not make ourselves bad and wrong for all the stuff we did wrong, then we can learn. And it's coming from that place. Let me learn from this situation where all the gold is. So those would be the two basic practices that I would say are really, really awesome. If you did nothing else and followed those two, you're going to continue to move yourself forward.
I agree. And I use those practices or something similar too. And I especially like the neutrality and not judging ourselves. Recently, I was asking myself, and you talk about the habit of overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
I create my own schedule. So if I'm overwhelmed, who created that? Right. But it is a habit, but the benefit that I got from it was being a little deceitful with myself, because underneath it for me is resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started recognizing, what I'm really saying is I'm resisting. I'm resisting something I set up that I want to do myself anyway. And so that can be kind of, and if I was judging and heavy-handed on myself, I could use that as a reason to, beat myself up. But instead, it's like, isn't that interesting?
Yes. And I love that
Yeah.
approach, Vicki, is coming from curiosity instead of judgment, right? And that, right, that clears out the self-critic when we just get curious instead. And when we get curious and we honor ourselves, right, for what we're doing, no matter what the result is, good or bad, when we honor ourselves for being human, instead of criticizing ourselves, accept ourselves, then we are creating that radical self-acceptance and self-love. So we really get to check in when that critic pipes up, and instead of all the judgment, just simply get curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any services or programs you want to tell our audience about? And how would our audience find you?
Yeah. So I do group programs and I do one-on-one clients right now. And I have a Facebook group where I do lots of teachings, webinars, and special workshops. I do all of that for free. So the Facebook group is the B&B Club, Breaking Your Own Boundaries and BS.
I love it.
Yes, anyone is welcome to join that. That's the space where I create a community where we all talk and share, and where I create a lot of value and content and just teach. So that's a big space. You're welcome to join that. I also have a website. It's just laurieschible.com. It is just that simple. And on my website, I have a freebie giveaway that I want to offer to your audience. So on my website, there is a button for it. You just click the link and it'll download and we'll send it to your email. So the giveaway is 5 steps to stop procrastinating and achieve your goals with ease. So that is available for your audience and anybody who would like it. You just go to my website for that. I'm also I am in Facebook. Laurie Schible Coaching is my business site. And then on Instagram as well, also under Laurie Schible Coaching. So lots of ways to get in touch with me. feel free to send me a Facebook message. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. Send me a message or through Instagram. Yeah, and join the Facebook group and join us in on some of the workshops and the content. You are all welcome here, and I love and honor the community that we've created.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you so much for being here with me. I've really enjoyed our show, and you've contributed a lot to the understanding for the audience, and I know they'll appreciate and value it too.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you so much, Vicki. This has been a true honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And for my audience, as I close out and end the show, you can find me. The easiest place is https://linktree, linktr.ee/vickidawn. And you'll find my website, how to subscribe to the podcast, my Facebook group link, everything will be there for you. And more, probably, than you care to push. And as we say goodbye, remember, you create your beautiful life one moment, one step at a time. And thank you for listening.